Guess what? I was a special guest on one of my favorite podcasts, Your Safe Space by Adele Maree. If you don't know Adele, you need to go check her out. She's absolutely amazing, and I was so honored and lucky to be invited on her show. So the following podcast is my appearance on her show, and it was such a great experience. If you love it, please make sure you let me know below. Enjoy the show.
You're listening to the Your Safe Space podcast hosted by me, Adele Maree. Today on air, we are joined by a clinical psychologist, board-approved supervisor, published author, and host of the What's Eating You podcast, Steph Giorgio. Steph, who is also known as Mind Food Steph on social media, shares her knowledge and expertise on eating disorders, binge eating, and ADHD. Today on the show, we are taking a deep dive into food freedom. We will be discussing all things eating disorders, binge eating, and behavior around food. I absolutely love having Steph on the show, so I hope you guys enjoy it too. Let's get into it. Hi, Steph.
Hello, Adele. Thank you for having me here today. I'm so excited.
Thank you so much for coming back. This is your second time on Your Safe Space.
Second time. I must have done a good job first time round, so thank you.
You did. I love having you on, and so did the listeners. We got a lot of downloads on your first episode, so I'm very keen to have you back on today. And I'm also keen because we're in real life today.
In person. I can't believe it. It feels so surreal.
I know. Last time we did a Zoom potty. So today I'm so happy that we're here in reality together. Now, you are joining us for a Sunday episode. So on our Sunday episodes, we do the What's Taking Up Space. Mm-hmm. So it can be something that is physical, mental, literal, that's taking up space in your world right now. If you are happy to share with the audience what's taking up space.
Ooh, absolutely. I love this. What's taking up space for me, I think, is just that I'm going to Thailand tomorrow and I don't feel ready. But do you ever feel ready to go away?
No, it's always like that before you go on a trip. What are you doing in Thailand?
I'm actually going to educate at a women's retreat. I'm very excited for that. So we've been doing Bali and now it's the first one in Thailand. So I'm excited, but I'm going to go there a little bit earlier, spend some time with a friend, do some reflecting, journaling, all the soul stuff. But yeah, just packing and getting ready for that. I think it's been on my mind a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I hope you have the best time educating people and enjoying your time in Thailand. We'll obviously keep an eye out on your socials to see what you get up to over there. Now, as I said, we're going to jump into our show because we got so many questions from the listeners around this topic. My question box blew up yesterday and I'm so happy because obviously I want to give the listeners that added professional support, and I always advocate for that on the podcast. So I'm so stoked to actually have you, a clinical psychologist, on here to help us today. So our first question from our listeners is, Steph, can you please provide us an overview of your work in the way that you help individuals with binge eating and eating disorders?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess it started way back when I went through my own eating disorder, as many people who were born in the 70s, 80s, 90s would have experienced. It was very diet culture-y and everyone wanted to lose weight and it was the peak of low sugar, low carb. All of that was very normalized and thank goodness we are moving away from that now. But yeah, I went through my own eating disorder struggle and I was actually studying to be a psychologist at the time, and that sort of led me down my own path of trying to figure it out, and I saw professionals and nothing really stuck. So I went down this journey of trying to figure out what is the answer to this? How do you build a healthy relationship with food? And over the course of my studies and being a psych and going through my own journey, I feel I really have the system that I think can help a lot of people, and it's just my passion. I know how many women it affects on a daily basis, and I don't think it's spoken about enough. I think it's normalized a little bit too much, and yeah, I just hope that if my videos or my content can help one person, then I'm happy.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I wanted to touch on as well. I feel like your content is great in that space. Like, you're so creative when it comes to showcasing maybe what somebody looks like when they're struggling with binge eating, or just giving it space to exist on the internet, which it doesn't. So I love that it's filling that gap, and obviously love that you're actually helping people as well.
Yeah, thank you. And I think bulimia is something I speak about a lot that people don't. I feel binge eating is covered so much because it's more acceptable, whereas I went through bulimia myself, and many people who purge or who compensate, and we'll go through the difference of the eating disorders in a moment, it doesn't get spoken about because bulimia and purging, you think it's disgusting, you're so ashamed of it. So that's something I really do talk about and bring light to, because we shouldn't be ashamed of it. It's happening and it's a problem that we need help with.
Yeah, I noticed in some of the questions that we got from the listeners, there was a lot of shame coming through, and even a lot of secretiveness about it, where they're not talking about it with people in their lives. So I'm so grateful that you're giving us your time today so we can talk about it here and hopefully help some more people out as well. You touched on it just then. What are the different types of eating disorders out there, and does binge eating fall under an eating disorder, or is that like a separate thing?
Really good question. So essentially there's this spectrum. There's a spectrum of regular eating when you're hungry, stopping when you're full. And then someone might say, go on a diet. Oh, I want to lose a couple of kilos. And they start to modify the way they eat or modify their exercise. And then what happens is when that becomes a little bit obsessive or it's taking up a lot of space, we dip into the subclinical realm of eating disorders. And then when people are preoccupied with their body weight, shape and size, when it's all they're thinking about, when it's interfering with their friendships, their occupational functioning, their day-to-day functioning, that's when it is an eating disorder. Now, not all eating disorders are around weight, shape and size. They're actually called feeding and eating disorders in the DSM-5, which is the diagnostic book. But yes, there are certainly, I guess, more common eating disorders that I can go through and explain. But binge eating on its own is not an eating disorder. It's a disordered eating behavior. And all it means is eating a large amount of food in a short period of time with a feeling of loss of control. And then following that, the person feels shame, they feel guilt, they might feel disgust. But essentially, if that is occurring often, at least once a week, for at least a month or so, then it could be an eating disorder, which is binge eating disorder.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot to go on there.
Yeah.
What would be the most common that you feel, like with the eating disorders that you feel you see?
Yeah, so there's this category of eating disorders called OSFED, which stands for Other Feeding Eating Disorder. And basically, this is a category of eating disorders where people don't quite fit the criteria. They may not fit the criteria of, say, anorexia or atypical anorexia or binge eating disorder or bulimia, but they've got traits or characteristics of either or, and they go into that category. So that is the most common. But yes, a binge eating disorder is the most common, it's believed. But again, what I believe is because there's a lot of shame and secrecy around bulimia, many people do not seek help. In fact, 75% of people with an eating disorder or disordered eating will not seek help.
Wow.
Yes.
That's scary.
It's scary. It's very real. And for anyone who's listening to this, if you have ever been on a diet, there is a 1 in 4 chance that you will develop an eating disorder or disordered eating.
I just got goosebumps because that's
same.
scary.
I know.
So scary, because I think you touched on it a little bit, but like growing up, like I even saw my own mum dip in and out of diets over and over. I trialed a lot of diets in my early 20s. I've come on this podcast and even said like I've had disordered eating behavior, and I never sought help and I never got that. I like self-diagnosed myself in my head, but it's really scary to know that 1 in 4 people could be at risk of developing that. And so you did touch on that. What are the other risk factors for somebody to develop an eating disorder or disordered eating?
Yeah. 1, being female.
Yeah.
Because we are, from a very young age, our appearance is so over-evaluated. From when you're a young girl, you're told, oh, you're so pretty, you're so beautiful. And then we get into makeup and then comparisons and TV. The stuff we were exposed to, which I'm sure many of your listeners were too. America's Next Top Model, The Biggest Loser, Dolly magazines.
Yeah.
What?
I know. I remember a very skinny Kate Moss always on the cover of magazines, always, but like very, very, very skinny and gaunt.
Yes.
And that was like the ideal body behavior, like body shape and body that you should aim for.
Yeah, and it was super normalized, and similar to you, I witnessed my mother go on these diets. I was like, oh, okay, so losing weight is a hobby that you just sort of do. And I went on the shake diet, the grapes diet, just you name it.
No carb diet.
Yeah, no carbs, and the Dukan diet. Ugh. Weight Watchers, and everything was just so normalized. And it's not until you actually realize, hang on a second, why am I doing this? Many people are not medically required to actually lose weight. And that's what I encourage people to really think about is, if you are wanting to lose weight, if you are wanting to be skinnier, why?
Yeah.
What do you think it's going to give you that you can't have now? So
Wow.
I don't think that was the question, but
No, I love that
just
we went
on a bit of
there.
a tangent.
I
Yeah.
love that we went there. So being female puts you at
risk
risk.
factors, yes. Having a parental figure who dieted. So
Yeah.
this is modeling behavior, learned behavior. So seeing a parent diet, a sister, being around friends who are dieting.
Have you seen that trend on TikTok, the almond mum trend?
Yes.
Having an almond mum. So
Yes.
for the listeners that maybe haven't seen it, it's like if you had an almond mum growing up, she would just likely eat almonds. Like that would be like a lunch for her.
Yes.
And some people who had almond mums have been making videos on TikTok. So yeah, that made me think of that parental modeling.
100%. And
Yeah.
it's still now, like even now, I come from an ethnic background, like Greeks alike and everything, and you say, oh, okay, what are we having for lunch? What? We just ate, 6 hours ago? So I think as well, like there's big cultural factors around it where food, body weight, shape and size can be, especially cultures that like love to feed you and you eat and food's celebrated and everything like that. So I think they can be potential risk factors. But yeah, just growing up with it, being in the Western culture. If you go anywhere else in the world, big is beautiful, shapes and curves are celebrated, but the thin ideal, it's a real westernized ideal that we have, that I wonder if we all grew up in different parts of the world, would we be so fixated on this?
Yeah, that's so fascinating. Does mental health play a part as well in somebody developing disordered eating or eating disorders?
Yeah, good question. I definitely think if you've got lower self-esteem or if you struggle with areas of mental health, you might put a greater emphasis on, if I can control my body and if I can control my appearance, then maybe that'll fix my self-esteem issue, or maybe that'll fix my anxiety around being with other people. So yeah, I think mental health concerns can make you more vulnerable, but I think eating disorders and disordered eating actually make you vulnerable to secondary mental health problems.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
It's like chicken and egg situation.
Yeah, and that's what brings people into therapy is, I have anxiety or I have low mood. And then when you dig a bit deeper, it's never the eating that's at the forefront of what the person thinks they need to fix, because they just say, oh, I'll lose weight, and then that will fix the problem.
Yeah. Wow. And do you think, would social media now be a risk factor too, or is it too early or late to tell that? Because I think as well, I'm just thinking of like the content that I sometimes come across on TikTok or Instagram, those like what I eat in a day videos or shit like that. I am really careful with what I try to post, and I try to be very neutral to food and like label things as like good and bad. But can that play a part as well?
Yeah, I love what you post, and I love having breakfast every day. That's very
Can't skip
important.
breakfast.
No, and your neutrality around food and different foods that you eat, I think is so great that you share that. But to answer your question, it depends on what they're watching.
Yeah.
Okay, so research has shown there's this term called visual adaptation, and if you are constantly looking at people who are thinner than you or have smoother skin or a smaller body weight, shape and size, you are likely and you will perceive your body to be abnormal and to be an outlier and to be different
Wow.
and above average. Yeah.
That's so
So it depends what
fascinating.
people are looking at. If you've got a diverse social media feed with lots of different races, shapes, sizes, you're less likely to feel bad because you're not comparing yourself to a sample that's not representative.
Yeah. So diversify up your social media feeds, everyone.
Yeah.
I love that.
And if it doesn't feel good, get rid of it.
Yeah. Oh, we covered so much just then. I love that. Our next question is, how would you differentiate between binge eating and emotional eating? And I wanted to put that in because I noticed some of the listeners were asking about emotional eating, and I'm like, that's not binge eating, is it?
No, and that's a great question. And I do actually want to say something. Not all eating disorders are because people are preoccupied with weight, shape, and size. So, for example, people who have binge eating disorder, which is eating a large amount of food in a short period of time with a feeling of loss of control, and then who feel guilt, may actually not care about their appearance. They might be binge eating to self-soothe, to deal with trauma, to regulate their nervous system. It could be a whole range of issues. So not everyone who has disordered eating or eating disorders has this desire to be thinner. I thought I would just mention that.
Yeah.
With bulimia, yes. So basically what bulimia is binge eating. So everything I described, eating a large amount of food, short period of time, loss of control, but then they compensate. So they compensate by self-induced vomiting, making themselves purge, laxative use, over exercise and fasting because they fear weight gain.
Okay.
Yes. So I just thought I'd make that very clear because there was a few questions around binge eating and if it's got nothing to do with food. But to answer your question, you can emotionally eat without binge eating. So emotional eating just means eating for reasons other than hunger.
Okay.
You eat cake when you're at a party.
Yeah.
You're happy. You have ice cream when your boyfriend broke up with you. And it's actually really healthy.
Oh, good.
Emotional eating is not bad unless it's your only coping strategy.
Okay.
But of course, the dieting industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry. So they want you to feel bad if you emotionally eat. There's something wrong with you. But emotional eating is very healthy in many cases, as long as it makes you feel better, not feel worse.
Yeah, I love that because I love a bit of comfort food sometimes. And even when I'm getting my period, PMS, I'm like, I need chocolate.
Yeah.
I need a sweet treat more than usual.
Hell yeah. And it's absolutely fine. And that's the idea, is that it makes you feel better, not feel worse. But usually what makes you feel worse is the judgment you're putting on yourself for eating this. Whereas if you honor that decision and say, you know what, I'm going out with my girls. Yay, we're going to the movies. We're going to get popcorn because I'm sad that my guy ghosted me or whatever. So functional.
Yeah.
So adaptive.
Yeah. Okay. And then when it comes to binge eating, why do people binge?
Such a good question.
Yeah.
I believe there's 3 to 4 reasons. So number one, people binge eat because they lack food structure.
Okay.
They don't eat consistent meals. They don't eat regularly enough. And restriction leads to binge. So if you're someone who's like, oh, I'm not going to have breakfast, or you skip meals, you're going to be so starving by the end of the day that your brain biologically, no matter how much willpower you have, the minute it sees quick energy, chocolate, carbs, it's just going to go for it because it doesn't know when you're going to starve it again. So under eating, which many women find surprising because many women think they're overeating, but they're actually under eating. Yep.
Yeah.
So a lack of food structure leads to binge eating, not eating regularly enough. The second thing is nervous system regulation. When you're stressed, when you're tired, when you're overwhelmed, when you're angry, you're just trying to regulate your nervous system, and it's not your fault because growing up, don't cry here, have a lollipop. Even when you go to the dentist, oh, you're such a good girl, have a lollipop.
Oh my God.
Yeah, what the hell? The dentist gave us lollipops.
I know.
After you got your fillings.
Even the doctor, have a jelly bean. My doctor used to give me jelly beans as a
That
kid.
jelly bean. Yeah. So from a young age, we are given food to reward ourselves, to stop negative emotions. It's like, oh, you were so good, here you go.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And now a lot of
Far
people
out.
use food as a reward.
Yeah.
It comes from somewhere. We're taught it from a very young age. So yeah, it could be a way to self-soothe, which you just taught to do as a kid. And the third reason is your thinking patterns. So if you're eating a cake and you think, oh, I've stuffed up, cake is so fattening, I'm going to gain weight, I might as well just keep going, those thoughts perpetuate binge eating. Whereas we eat a cake, oh, yum, that was great. What's on for the day?
Yeah.
Your behavior's not going to change. Thoughts control your behavior.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll get to another question about the thoughts as well in a second.
Sure.
Do you have any tips for someone who is listening and finds himself in a cycle of binge eating? Do you have any tips to help them break it?
Absolutely. So the first thing is figuring out what the binge eating is about, right? If it is because you're not eating regularly enough, you have to eat regularly and stop restricting. So many people come to me like, I want to stop binge eating. It's actually the restriction you need to stop.
Yeah.
Because restriction leads to binge. And this is the thing. In the first stage of food freedom, we focus on food structure. And the minute I have people eating 3 meals and 2 to 3 snacks, 80% of their binges will stop.
Wow.
So when you say the cycle, usually the binge restrict cycle is, that's it. Today I'm going to eat really well. I'm going to have my protein. I'm going to not have too many carbs, and then 3 o'clock comes, your work colleague brings donuts in and you're like, just one bite. And then what happens is in your brain, you've broken a dietary rule. So you think, I've stuffed up, I might as well just eat 4 donuts and I'll start fresh tomorrow. So then you restrict.
Yeah.
So you wake up, you're like, I'll skip breakfast to make up for the donut. Then that restriction leads to the binge. It's not the binging you have to control, it's the restriction, because binging is serving a function and it's meeting a need. And you have to figure out what it is. So people are trying to take away the one coping mechanism they have. It's not going to work. You have to figure out, what need is this meeting? Is it meeting my need of comfort? Is it meeting my need of food because I've put myself through a starvation cycle? So once you meet that need in other ways that are more functional, it should reduce.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
It's very fascinating, like, hearing this and then just looking back at some of like my own behavior, and I'm like, wow, it makes so much sense to just hear that from you now.
100%.
It's crazy.
I thought I went and got hypnosis because I thought I had a chocolate addiction.
Yeah.
But I was eating chocolate and craving it because I wasn't eating any carbohydrates throughout the day. So my brain was just wanting sweets.
Yeah.
But the minute I started eating, magically my out of control eating stopped.
And now you just have chocolate whenever.
Yeah, I know I can have it whenever, and then it's not on this huge pedestal, and you just become neutral with food.
Yeah. So you did mention your thoughts impacting your behavior, right? And I noticed a lot of the questions, there were a lot of food rules in some of the questions and a lot of negative thoughts and guilt associated with certain foods. Do you have any tips for someone who's listening and is wanting to change those thoughts? Like, where would they start?
Yeah, such a great question. Awareness precedes change. So the first thing you want to do is become aware of your thoughts by recording them and tracking them down. So I actually have a free binge tracker. We can put the link below or in my profile. And I encourage people, when you are binge eating, track what you're thinking and what you're feeling. You see, a lot of these programs out there will say, oh, you know what, track your calories, track your macros, track your food, but no one tells you to track your thoughts and your feelings with the food. And when people do this, they are astonished. They cannot believe what comes up because it's so automated, the way you behave. So if you want to change your thoughts, number one is to become aware of them. So when you're feeling upset, triggered, following a binge, and try to do this as close as you can to the binge, write down what you're thinking and feeling. So for example, say you ate a donut at a party and then you ate 6 donuts, write it down and say, okay, what was I thinking? What was I feeling? I thought I stuffed up, I shouldn't have eaten the donut, I have no control, I'm never going to lose weight, I'm never going to find a partner. Really dig deep. And then the second part of that is try to counteract those thoughts a little bit. So it's not about thinking positive all the time. That's a load of rubbish. It's about thinking effectively. So when you have a bite of a donut, is it effective for you to be like, I've stuffed up, I have no control, I'm fat and disgusting? Probably not. So what you might say is, you know what? I had a bite of a donut, and whilst I didn't plan to eat 6 donuts, it happened and I'm working on it.
Yeah, it feels so much nicer even just hearing you say that.
So much nicer. And then the compassion and the self-compassion just neutralizes the negative feelings. And when your negative feelings are reduced, you're not going to feel this need to keep going. So yeah, awareness, balance out your thoughts with a more effective thought, but it takes practice, and this feels so weird. And a lot of the people I work with will say, but Steph, I don't believe the thoughts. And it's okay. You don't have to believe it.
Yeah.
But you have to practice it. Because
it will get easier.
It gets easier.
Yeah.
This is 20 years of programming that we need to deprogram. So by repeating it and practicing, you are creating networks in your brain, and that default pattern of thinking is going to start to change.
Yeah. So you can change it.
You can.
Takes time.
It takes time, and also challenging beliefs. For example, I was working with someone and they had these beliefs around they have to have protein at every meal. I was like, oh, this is really interesting. Okay, let's challenge that. Where's the evidence that you have to have protein at every meal or else you're going to fail and gain weight and all that? So challenging your beliefs as well. Like, where's the evidence that you need to change who you are to meet a partner, etc.? So taking a step back and actually looking at your thoughts with curiosity rather than criticism.
Yeah. We love that.
We love
and
it.
compassionate. And being compassionate to yourself.
Yes.
Yeah. And for someone who is listening and maybe doesn't feel like they have disordered eating or don't partake in binges, but are just wanting to be a bit more balanced to food, what advice would you give someone listening that fits that descriptor?
Yeah, and I think it really depends on what does balanced mean for that person.
Yeah.
Right? So I get people who say, oh, I just want to be more healthy. Okay, what does health mean to you? Because
I don't like the term healthy, sorry.
yeah, I know. It's just so hard. And that's why I always ask people, okay, what does that mean to you? Because often they've actually done research and studies on this and they've asked women, what is your idea of healthy? If you were healthy, what would be different? Oh, I'd be skinnier. I'd be in a smaller body. And they equate health to image, which is so interesting.
Yeah.
So it's important to really break down, what does health mean for you? Does health mean that your hormones are functioning optimally? Does health mean that you're able to walk up the stairs? Does health mean that you're able to eat chocolate without thinking about it for 3 business days after?
Yeah.
Like, what is health?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And what people don't realize is, yes, you've got this desire to lose weight and be skinny and all that, but the level of, how do I place this, cognitive load and ongoing torture to maintain that isn't exactly healthy.
Yeah.
Mentally healthy.
Yeah.
So there's different types of health, and I know the question was about balance. So number one, what is your idea of health? What is your idea of balance? Right? And there's different types of health. Like, of course, there are foods that are more nutritionally optimal than others. Okay, eating an apple may be more nutritionally optimal than eating a chocolate. But there's also psychological health. And on some days, it's more psychologically healthy to have the chocolate over the apple.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know? So, yeah, what does balance look like? But if we're talking about a nutritional balance, I always say to people, don't cut things out. Just, you can add things in. If you really want the apple, you'll have it. But it's okay if you don't want it.
Yeah. I love that. Add things in and not restrict.
Yeah.
Not restrict, yeah. Especially if you're not allergic or you can't eat. If there's no reason for you not to eat something, you shouldn't cut it out, because then it can mess around with how you view the food too down the track.
Yeah, you really have to question yourself. And this is the hardest truth that many women come to realize is, oh my gosh, why am I doing this? Like, I'll ask people, how come you're drinking black coffee till 12 o'clock? Oh, because I fast. Why? I don't know. Isn't that what you do? I don't know. Is it? Like, you have to really check yourself and say, what am I doing? And catch yourself out, because it's so subconscious and ingrained.
Definitely. All right. Now, I'm sure we've had people listening who can either feel seen or feel a bit validated in this episode. And if they feel like they do have an eating disorder or disordered eating, what is their next step? Where do they start? Where do they go?
Yeah, great question. Look, there's different avenues for support and help, but if you are going to see a psychologist, make sure they've got expertise and training in the area of eating disorders, because a lot of psychologists are not trained in it. That's why I take this approach on social media, and my program is a coaching program, because there's so many facets that need to be addressed. But if anyone is struggling, they are more than welcome to reach out. You can get my book for free on Audible on a trial. I've also got physical books, or you can book a free one-on-one call with me if you want to talk about it and just explore what's going on. But I think if someone's questioning if they have it, it's usually a pretty good sign that there's something there that's not right, that it's not sitting with them. And the signs might include thinking about food constantly, preoccupied with your body weight, shape and size, fear of weight gain, etc. But just talking about it is a great first step with someone you trust.
Yeah, absolutely. And what can somebody do if they feel like they've got someone in their life who is struggling, or they feel like, and I'm not to say that like someone would always look like they're struggling, because sometimes you might not look like you're struggling with food or your body.
100%.
But there were some questions of people asking, like, I think my friend is struggling. How do I support my friend, or what do I do to help my friend or family member or colleague, or what could someone do?
And that's the thing. eating disorders do not discriminate on weight, shape, size. You can be any weight, shape, and size and be struggling. If you are concerned, definitely speak to that person from a place of curiosity and kindness and concern.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think when I was going through my eating disorder, my family knew, and they didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to approach it. And people with eating disorders already feel attacked, and they're usually on the offense. But just come up to someone and say, hey, I'm really concerned. I've noticed XYZ, and maybe just say what you've observed and what you've noticed. Are you okay? What's going on? Just opening the conversation like that, and just noticing what you've seen, what you've observed. Like maybe they're more tired than normal. Maybe they're never eating around you. Maybe they're rushing off to the bathroom after meals. There's lots of things to look out for. But I think just raising it in a compassionate and caring and curious way can start the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so hard. And our last question, Steph, is there, because I know you do a lot of content around ADHD as well, is there a link between binge eating and ADHD?
Yeah, eating disorders and ADHD have a huge link that I think isn't spoken about enough, because with ADHD, it's a neurodevelopmental disorder, which means people have lower levels of access to dopamine and norepinephrine. And because they have those lower levels of access to dopamine, they're looking for it in other places. And food is a really quick way to get that dopamine fix. And not only that, people with ADHD and unmanaged or undiagnosed ADHD have a lot of anxiety and stress. So then they might be going to food to regulate their nervous system. So there's a few ways indirectly that it's related. And also some of the women I've worked with have said they've used purging to calm themselves down and to alleviate their nervous system. So it's really interesting to see how it starts to manifest. So yes, there is a really big link between the two.
That's so fascinating, because I also have seen as well, there's probably been more of an increase or more awareness of women being diagnosed with ADHD later in life too.
Yeah.
More so lately than I've ever seen before, because I know women can also mask it and stuff like that too. But someone could even be struggling with ADHD, not know that, and then also be struggling with disordered eating and not really understand how that link is there. So that's so fascinating.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's important to address.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a deep episode, but such a good one. So much education in here. I'm sure the listeners will be loving it. Where can they find more of you? Because you've got a podcast, you've got your own books. Give us all the plugs.
Thank you so much. So first of all, thank you for having me on the show, Adele, and for sharing your wonderful audience with me. And if you're listening to this, well done on wanting to invest and learn and grow. If you want to connect with me, my socials are Mind Food Steph on TikTok and Instagram. And if anyone uses Facebook, I have a Facebook page. But yeah, feel free to touch base. If you want to look deeper into your eating, you can book a free one-on-one eating evaluation call where we just unpack what's going on for you. And if you like, you can grab my book on Audible. You can grab it on Amazon, wherever you like.
What's your book called?
Oh, good one. It's called Food Jail, Breaking the Bars of Binge Eating.
Amazing.
I almost said Food Freedom, but that's the program. Food Jail is the book and Food Freedom is the program.
Yeah, and I'll leave all those links in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me.
All right, Steph, we're at the end of the show. Very sad to see you go, but we wrap the show with a recommendation, a little sign off, something that you're loving, your share of the week. Do you have something for us?
Yes, I love this. Okay. I forgot how good smells are. So I went into Dusk this morning, that shop, and I sprayed myself with a few different scents. And I feel so happy and good smelling this beautiful scent on me all day. And it really is a great tool that we forget about, is the sense of smell, the scent of smell. It's a sense.
It's a sense.
It's a sense. Fifth sense. And just using it to regulate your nervous system. Smell is one of the quickest ways. So I was just reminded of how good smell is to have. So if you're wanting to get a new smell, go into Dusk and smell some candles or get a spray.
I love candles and I love incense.
Yes.
For that reason. I'm just like, freshens up everything, but takes me to Bali or like a nice place, like a tropical place.
Transports you.
Yeah.
What's your share?
My share. So my share is so off topic and out of pocket for this episode, but yesterday I got a blow wave Right. And I can't, like, I rarely would just go and get a blow wave. And I really like the fact that I didn't have to wash my own hair.
Yes.
And it was like a little treat, and I just felt so good. And I'm like, maybe I should treat myself to a blow wave a little bit more often, because it was so underrated.
It really is. And it's so interesting you say that, because my sister's a hairdresser, and she was telling me yesterday, she's like, Steph, go get a blow wave because it actually closes the cuticle and it makes your hair look really smooth and finished. And I was like, what? There's actually a purpose behind it? She goes, yes, you have to close the cuticle when you're drying your hair.
Oh my God. That's why my hair looks so smooth today.
Oh, it's such a good investment. It looks beautiful. I had one too.
You had one too. Twins.
Blow wave besties.
Great hair in here today. All right, guys, we're going to leave you here. As I said, I'll put all of Steph's link in the show notes. If you haven't, also make sure you follow Your Safe Space Pod on TikTok, Instagram, and join our Facebook group. And while you were listening to this podcast, please put up a story, tag Steph, tag the podcast so we can reshare, and that way we can get it into the ears of more people who might need it. And we'll see you next time. And hopefully I can get you to come back for a third time, Steph.
I would love to. See you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
This podcast was recorded on Wurundjeri land, hosted by me, Adele Maree. Your Safe Space is a part of the Amplify Podcast Network.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. I am truly grateful for you being here. If you got something out of today's show, please take a moment to leave a rating or review. To access more resources or support, check out the show notes below. See you next time.